welcome to the RYLACast, the official podcast of Camp RYLA, Rotary District 5810. I'm Greg Tupper, speaking into a microphone. There's another microphone here. It is sitting in front of...
Who?
Andrew, Josey, Utz.
Oh, well, hello, Greg. I ruined it.
No, you did great. You've been on every episode of this podcast. You know how hard it is to ruin a podcast.
That is true.
Buddy, you got to try. But, so thank you for joining us on this episode of the RYLACast. Do you... I don't get nervous very often.
Not very often.
Not very often when we're doing this show. But I gotta admit, a little nervous right now.
Yeah. I can feel it.
Do I feel like you're getting that sense? Here's the thing, is I don't want to screw up in front of our guest. Because we have a guest in the studio. And, I want to impress.
I can feel kind of the twitchy, the heel.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I'm tapping my toe. Because on this episode of the podcast, the RYLACast, we are joined by Celeste Bucchan. Yay! Wow. What I appreciate is I think you're the first person to woo yourself.
With the hands and everything.
Hey, you got to be your biggest cheerleader sometimes.
I love it. Hello, Celeste.
Hello.
I haven't seen you in a minute.
I know. It's good to see you guys.
I know.
It's good to see you.
Thanks for joining us on season 2 of the RYLACast.
Thanks for inviting me.
Well, we've been trying to get you on the show for a while.
I know. Adulting is hard.
Finally, our people talk with your people, and
it actually
made it work.
It took both of us to make sure you were here.
Okay. Yes. So we can air. No, let's air this dirty laundry. Let's air this dirty laundry. All right, Utz.
Let's go, Tepper.
So, whenever we decided on this recording date of the podcast, we both decided, because we pulled back just to totally ruin any sort of illusion that this is a podcast that's been like this isn't mass produced. We record 4 podcasts at a time, and so we both split up the guests. You book 2 guests. I'll book 2 guests. We had not talked for about a couple of days.
Yeah, again, peel back the curtain.
And so I go and I said, you know who would be... I finally get around to booking guests. I go, you know who would be a great podcast guest? Is Celeste. And she likes me. She'll say yes. And so... Why are you laughing at that?
It's the truth. I do like you. I did say yes.
So I texted her, and she said... And the first thing she said was... OMG, I forgot to text Josey back.
Yes.
And I'm going like, what are we after?
Because 5 days before that day, I reached out.
5 days seems so long.
I know, it does. And I was, because adulting is hard, I was giving you the benefit of the doubt. I texted Celeste and said, hey, how would you like to be a guest on the award-winning RYLACast? And she said, I would love to. Let me check my schedule and get back to you.
Can I use a young person term? Because you're a young person. I know I'm.
I'd like to think so.
I know I'm a boomer and I'm washed, right? But can I tell you something?
Sure, you can.
You left Josey on red for 5 days.
I did.
Yeah.
And you know what, Josey? It'll never happen again. Okay?
No, I'll let you explain yourself.
Yes, I will make sure that from now on, Josey, you're on the top of my response list when I look at my texts. I just, adulting is hard and sleeping is great. So I slept a couple times.
I just want to point this out that I sent her a text at 1:05 and she got back to me at 1:05.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie.
She got back to me within 60 seconds.
When I realized Celeste has read receipts on, I get really nervous. I clam up.
Ooh, yeah.
Because, when I open, and I try to explain this to people, those little 3 dots, you better text
They cause
something.
a lot of anxiety, those dots.
Anxiety.
Yeah.
And so when I see that, oh, man, it's a time. Okay, I got to text her back right now. It doesn't matter what it is. But, no, I gave you your space.
5 days of space.
It worked out.
In my defense, I was waiting on my superior at work on scheduling.
Okay.
But it worked out.
All right.
Yes, and I'm glad to be here.
Well, we're glad you're here, contrary to us airing your dirty laundry here on the show. All right. Here in just a little bit, we're going to get to know Celeste. because I know that's why you all tuned in. But first, you have to deal with Josey and I for a minute, because we asked Celeste, as we do with all of our guests, to choose a word. And Celeste, I'm going to put you on the spot. Do you remember what word you chose?
I did.
Oh! Which is?
Intentional.
Yay! You did remember it. I would, because I think we've definitely had a guest who did not remember.
Yes.
What word they did.
I was very intentional with choosing my
word. See, we love a callback here.
This is going to be good.
This is a callback. And so I have drawn the duty of doing the long... the big segment, the opening salvo of this episode of the RYLACast about intentional or intentionality. Right. This one was tough. I'm going to be honest, Celeste. You sprung this on me, and I was like, uh-oh. Yeah. So it's hard to define, right? It's hard to like, I think we all know what being intentional means and what being an intentional leader is all about. I think we could identify it, but it's hard to explain. And that's a problem in an audio medium, right?
Yeah.
And so I started looking around trying to find someone who could sum it up in a way that is that feels right to me. That when I think about what intentional leadership is, whenever I read these words, I get that same feeling, right? Mm-hmm. Okay. I didn't find it. I'm going to be honest. Okay. But what I did find was a bigger conversation about being intentional and why it's important to be intentional. Let's start with this. You should... I think a lot of what being intentional as a leader is all about is value. And what I mean by that is valuing people. Valuing their time, valuing their efforts, valuing their what they bring to the table, valuing who they are as people. I think a lot of it comes down to that. Because if you're not being intentional, if you're going about things in a way that is just kind of, we'll take it as they come. We'll just do things that are do things maybe without a strategy or something like that. Ultimately, that is a reflection of how you value the people around you. If you're saying, you know what, we don't need a strategy, we will figure it out. We will go in there and we will just, we'll figure it out. We'll take it as they come. Ultimately, what you're saying is, you know what, the people around me, the people who I am going to be leading on this journey, I don't value you enough. I mean, I'm confident I'll get to where I need to go, but I don't value you enough to really go to really give you any sort of firm instructions on where we should go from here. Right?
Mm-hmm. Right.
So I think a lot of it comes back to value, and it comes back to, I think, adding value to people, making them feel more valuable. Because I think when you act intentionally, what you're doing is you are fundamentally saying, I value you, and I want you to feel valued, and I want to find a way to make you even more valuable to this organization, to whatever we're doing. So can you find ways to make them more valuable? And then I think it's a matter of paying that forward and encouraging people to pay that forward and say, okay, I am going to act in such a way that you feel valued in this organization. Your job is now to go forward and do that same thing to somebody else. Mm-hmm. When I started reading something about that word value kept coming back to me of something that felt like a good summation of a very difficult word to sum up. Of let's go through and make sure that you are valuing the people around you, that you are making them feel valued, and you're adding to their value, making sure that they are increasing what they can do for their organization, and furthermore paying that forward to other people. It's a hard thing to describe, but I think that fundamentally, if you're going into a task with a purpose, and you're going into a task with a clear eye on where you want to go, ultimately you're going to be showing the people around you that you value them and that you are deserving, I think, of them, of being their leader in that regard. Does that make sense? I'm kind of dancing around it a little bit because it's hard, because Celeste set me up for failure. Thinking a lot of Celeste.
Yeah, Celeste picked a very difficult word. But no, I think you summed it up perfectly. And I think it's one of those words that you dance around, but it's also like it's not in the middle when you're dancing around it. It's also kind of all over the place because it's those things, items that you discussed, values.
Let me give you a quote.
Okay.
This is a quote from a guy named John Maxwell.
Yes, John Maxwell.
He wrote a book called Intentional Living. The quote is, having that is a typo. That is a typo. Okay, hold on. We'll try again. I'll cut this out. I won't cut this out. Wanting to help people and add value to them makes you a better person. But if you don't act on it in an intentional way, it won't make a difference. We have to strive every day to make every day our masterpiece. And I think what I like about that quote is that you're saying you can have good ideas and you can have good intentions, but if you don't act on them, if you say, I want to make you feel special, but if I just don't go out there and do that, then it's wasted and we're not doing anything. At that point, you got to have a strategy and act in a way that is going to get you where you want to go. Okay. That's something to think about.
That's really good.
It was tough. It was tough, Celeste. Why couldn't you choose, like, books?
You're doing a great job.
Yeah, books would be a good
Books
one.
would have been easy because I know what books are. Anyway, that's something to think about. All right. Let's move on to our very special guest. Oh, Josey, this is where you're supposed to pretend there's a commercial break. So pretend there's a commercial break. I'm not editing this out, by the way. No, we'll wait.
That was our commercial.
I don't know why is the Jeopardy music playing. That's fine.
I know what Celeste does in her spare time.
No. Oh, Josey.
Oh, Greg.
We have a very special guest in the studio. Somebody who came straight from work to be here.
That's true.
She got stuck in traffic to be here. You can hear her smiling into the microphone. Ladies and gentlemen, we were joined by Celeste Bucchan. Yay! Hi, Celeste.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm well. How are you?
Good. Thank you for saying well instead of good. That makes me, as a grammar nerd, that makes me very happy. Okay, Celeste, we finally got you in the hot seat. We've been trying for months to get you on this podcast.
You guys make me sound so busy.
Well, I mean, you left Josey on red for 5 minutes. For 5 days.
Yikes.
So we know you're busy. You're a very busy person. But let's go back in time.
All right.
Months to when you were a RYLA camper. Can you tell us a little bit about your RYLA story? How you got involved, how you got started in this organization?
Right. So I was a camper in 2011, and I first learned about RYLA from my older sister. All I knew about RYLA was it's a week-long camp, you're applying, and you're going to go. And I looked at her like, no, I'm not.
You mean outside with strangers?
For a week?
For a week?
Yes. So RYLA was the first time that I was away from my family for anything longer than like a sleepover at a friend's house. So I was definitely like, no, ma'am. And then that was the first year that she wasn't at camp because she was doing grad school abroad. And so I was like, you make me apply for this place, you send me here, and then you don't come. So I can't even at least sneak off and talk to you for a second and be like, hey, I'm freaking out about this. And so I just remember being like so mad at her, like, why would you do this to me? And so I get to camp, and I'm typically one that's like very much in my shell. So I get to camp, and people are screaming and grabbing me out of the car, and I'm like,
you people are nuts.
What did I get myself into? But I'm sure that you guys have heard multiple different times on this podcast, RYLA is one of the best things that has ever happened to me. And I can't imagine what life would look like if I didn't have RYLA. I didn't have the community that is RYLA, and I didn't have the lessons that I learned at camp that get built on every year that I do get to go back. And so I am planning on going back to RYLA for as long as I can, or at least continuing to build the foundation and the community that I've gotten through camp.
So what keeps you coming back intentionally?
Such a good question.
Don't encourage.
The idea that every year you come back, camp looks different and feels different. The programming obviously typically stays generally the same because we have a different set of campers every year. But being on staff, there's not one year that I've gone back that I've said, oh, this is exactly like last year, or that I've gotten the same thing that I had gotten out of the year before. And so coming back to camp allows me to really add the building blocks of my leadership journey, and really just helps me kind of refocus and get pumped up for the rest of the year.
So what do you, first of all, where'd you go to high school?
I went to Creekview in Carrollton.
Go Mustangs. And then, so what do you do now? Do you have a job?
I do have a job, thankfully. I am currently a therapeutic early childhood educator.
Okay.
So basically that means that I work with...
explain that like I'm an early child.
Right. So basically that means that I work with children that are the age of 3, and because they have dealt with different traumas, my job is to make sure that they are learning educationally, but also to support them developmentally. And so that means that they may be age-wise 3 years old, but developmentally they may act as a 2-year-old. And so my biggest thing is to make sure that we get them so that they are ready to be in a typical school. And so that's what I do all day, every day.
So you play with kids?
No.
I'm kidding.
Kind of, sort of, yeah, though.
Yeah.
I make it fun.
I was going to say, like, I can't... How do I say this in a way that I want it to come out?
In the audio.
I can't imagine you doing something that's not fun.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? That
makes sense.
That's not a jerk thing to say, right?
No, I don't think so.
I just imagine like you being like, all right, we're going to maximize the fun in this particular situation. And I just imagine that that's the way you are with the kids.
Yes, I feel like if I'm laughing happy all day long, they'll be laughing and happy all day long. So why not make it fun for the both of us? So all day long, I try to do different things no matter what I'm doing, even if it's some sort of discipline. I try to make sure that there's something positive that comes out of it.
So how do you, and I know you've touched on this a little bit, how do you use things you've learned from RYLA, whether that's your camper year or years on staff, in your everyday life? Or do you?
Yeah. So my camper year was when I first heard Jerry Traylor speak, and he said in his speech to live your life to make an impact, not an impression. And my camper year, it didn't really stick with me, but when I came back as an AC, I was like, oh, that's a pretty good point. And then the next year that I came back on staff, it hit me in a different way. And so now I kind of feel like that's my life motto. Every day in my job, I try to make sure that what I'm doing is something that's going to be lasting for that child. And so making impressions is great. Like, I want my parents to love me, I want my kids to love me, but ultimately I want to make sure that I'm doing things that years from now, even if that child does not remember my name, they act in a certain way or they respond in a certain way that I may have laid that foundation for.
You've had a lot of roles at camp and in the RYLA organization. Which one do you think was the most challenging for you?
Ooh. I would definitely say being a counselor. And this past year was my first year in that role. But I would say that it was probably one of the most challenging for me because I'm a perfectionist. And so I want to go into things with a plan and be able to have my A or B lane and know what comes next. And anyone who's been in the counsel role knows that that's not really how RYLA works. Ever,
any time.
Basically. It's like the complete opposite of what RYLA is. But it really just solidified for me that whole stepping out of your comfort zone and kind of allowing things to fall into place. Because when you get into the role, your experience is never the same as a different counselor's experience, but your experience is exactly what you need. And I think that me being a counselor and being put in such a big role, I was able to kind of figure out what it is that I needed to be for my campers so that I can make sure that they had a great experience.
Forgive me if this has already been mentioned, but you chose the word intentional. Why did you choose that word?
Aside from torturing me.
Right.
Making it a little difficult. I chose intentional because it's how I personally try to live my everyday life. And I think that when we take a step back and we look at the things that we do throughout the day and we really focus on being intentional, and like Greg mentioned, kind of backing that up with valuing, you can really see the difference that it makes in people. I have worked with a lot of different people who are intentional, but they don't add in that value aspect. And so what you get from them is someone that, like Greg says, has an idea that would probably work, but there's no follow through, and so it doesn't get displayed the way that they would like to. So for me, being intentional means making someone feel special in a way that maybe someone else didn't. And I always remember the quote that says, people might remember what you do, but they'll always remember how you make them feel. And so I think that that's a big part of being intentional, is making sure that you are doing things that not only better yourself, but also allow people to see the better side of you and for you to see the better side in somebody else.
All right. Yeah. That's making me think. Sorry. That struck me in a very odd way.
Not everybody can.
It's a good way. Yeah, that's how you've done the impossible. You've done what my wife has been trying to do for years, which is to get me to shut up. But we like to give our guests. You said you've listened to this podcast before, right?
I have.
Well, so then we like to give our guests an opportunity to plug something. If there is something that you are passionate about, something that you really like at the moment, something that you want to tell, you want the whole world to hear. Now's the time. The floor is yours.
So lately I have really been into like self-meditation. And so I take maybe 5 or 10 minutes of my day, depending on how the day has been. And I just kind of sit, and I might play some like instrumental music or something in the background. And I just kind of sit and center myself, whether that means I'm praying or I'm just kind of allowing myself to sit and not think about anything and just breathe for a moment. And I've seen that that's kind of really just helped me like recenter. And when things get a little crazy in the day, because I sometimes do it on my lunch break, it kind of just recenters me and I get to start all over. So that's like my biggest thing right now. Also, me time. I go get my nails done every 2 weeks.
Your nails, but you can't see this as an audio medium, but your nails are fabulous.
Oh, yes, thank you.
They look great.
But yeah, that's like making sure that I plan something into my schedule that's literally just for me, by me. Like, I don't have to deal with anyone else, work on anyone else's time. But just making sure that I focus on loving myself.
All right, one more question.
Okay.
For Celeste. You deal with 3-year-olds and younger, right?
Yes.
Okay, 3-year-olds and younger. Compare and contrast dealing with your 3-year-olds with dealing with Josey and I. See,
I would like to say...
Hard-hitting question.
You guys are just as fun.
Well, yeah, initially I was excited about that, and now I'm rethinking.
No, I laugh all day long with my kids. So, you know, I feel like I've been laughing pretty much all of this podcast. But,
again, like, you know.
That's good.
I think you guys are doing a great job. But yeah, so it's just as fun. You guys ask harder questions, that's for sure.
What are the questions you get from your 3-year-olds?
Why? That's like
Just
their favorite question.
Like why? Why?
Why?
Like that?
Why? And you don't want to answer with because I said so, right? Because they're asking why because they genuinely don't understand.
Yeah, my kid can't talk yet. He can babble and stuff like that, but he can't
Get
talk.
ready for it.
And it's like, I'm kind of like, if you just want to not... Like, you need to talk, but, like, maybe not to me. You know what I mean? Like, talk to your teacher. That's fine. Talk to your mom. That's fine.
to Celeste.
Whys those are the best and worst questions, because when you can't figure out another answer.
Well, we are glad that whenever Josey texted you and to come on the podcast, you didn't say, why?
Why?
Celeste Bucchan, yay! And again, this is where you're going to pretend that there's a commercial break.
Okay.
I'm not going to edit this out, though.
Well, upgrade to the music.
And our thanks once again to Celeste Bucchan for being our guest here on the RYLACast. I told you this is just a disaster. We're getting canceled at any point. They're
I think everyone will listen, honestly.
I think people are going to tune in for you.
Yes.
And then they're going to hear us and be like, oh.
Yeah. So we tell people it's a big segment of us, then Celeste.
Yes. We keep them around.
Fast forward.
But now,
fast forward.
We do. Yeah, the 30 seconds forward.
Yeah.
But we do have something to leave you with on the topic of authenticity or authentic. No. That was a different one. But thank Intentional or intentionality. I am extremely tired.
Time is a flat circle.
Yes, time is a flat circle. And here was something to leave you with on intentionality. It's Andrew Josey Utz.
Well, thank you, Greg. Yes. I'm going to peel back the curtain a little bit to Celeste. This is what I have written down for the something to leave you with segment.
Oh, no. It says intentional.
It says intentional. And I've been sitting here thinking the entire podcast, thinking and listening, that you chose... There are a couple guests we've had on this podcast that pick words that are... It's like, oh, yes, that word describes that person perfectly. Mm-hmm. And I think intentional... That is Celeste Bucchan to a T, in the good way. And I know we kind of gave you a hard time about the scheduling issue, but that's an important. It brings up an important part of you are very intentional in everything you do, and this something to leave you with is kind of I'm going to talk about you. And other people, but it's more of a challenge because I struggle with this. I am more along the lines of what Greg was describing earlier, where it's like, you know what? Come on, everybody. Let's just go, and we're going to get there. Here's our rough outline of what we're going to do. But it doesn't, like Greg said, it doesn't value. If you're with other people, that's wasting their time, to put it bluntly. And you, Celeste, you apologize today, hey, sorry I didn't get back to you, but you have your schedule and you have things that you need to do and you're going to do, and it's not I feel like being intentional sometimes has a negative connotation because people take it as I don't have time for you, but that's not the case. In a leadership aspect, when you, Celeste, say I am being intentional, you don't want to give anybody less than 100%. And so that's tough. That's something I struggle with as a leader is giving myself 100% to the topic at hand.
And it goes back to what she was talking about. Let's act like she's not here, right? Let's talk directly to one another. Yeah. It goes back to the thing she said about like being a perfectionist. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? And I feel like with intentionality, there is it's easy to let good be the enemy of perfect. And then, that's a big thing for me. Yeah. Of letting good be the enemy of perfect, because it's like, I am being intentional, so I want everything to go perfectly, right? Mm-hmm. That's just not the way it's going to go, right? But I think that you're right, I think that there's inevitably, I'm a big believer that all the people in RYLA, even though we are so different and weird, meaning that we are so disparate, like we come from different backgrounds, we come from different communities, we come from different, all these things, different families. We're all kind of wired the same. Mm-hmm. I think that's kind of what kind of keeps us all around. Mm-hmm. And so I think all of us have that little bit of perfection, at least a little bit of perfectionist in us. And I don't think that perfectionism and intentionality can coexist. I really don't. I don't think it can. I think that it's got to be one or the other, because if you are going through, I think that if you are going through and you're trying to be intentional, that is fundamentally you're having to, if you're being truly intentional, you have to admit to yourself that things are not going to go great, they're not going to go perfectly, and you have to be okay with that. Mm-hmm. So now I'll bring Celeste back into the conversation. Yeah. Anyway, the soundproof wall is down. Okay. Anyway.
But yeah, so something to leave you with is really a challenge to everyone, and I'll take Celeste off the hot seat. Jenny DiDonato is another RYLA camper that comes to mind as somebody that is very intentional in everything they do. And so I challenge everyone to just pick one thing this week. We're just going to do an open slate, one thing this week that you are going to devote 100% of your time to. It can be 5 minutes or 5 hours, but be intentional and let that push you on into intentional leadership.
I love it. Good job. We danced through that one as you gave us the hardest word yet.
And also, I would say too, let the word intentional and intentionality kind of reshape what you think being a perfectionist is. Because I know that for me, that was a big struggle. But when I sit back and I think about, yes, I'm a perfectionist, so I want to do things the way that I believe they should be done. When you're being intentional, it kind of goes back to that value aspect. Maybe you are a perfectionist, but you're a perfectionist in the way that you make people feel, or you're a perfectionist in the way that you decide to make intentionality look like. And so focusing more on that perfectionist piece being, I am going to work on myself so that I can be a better person for other people around me, versus I am going to make sure this task is done a certain way, and this is the only way it needs to be done.
Give yourself grace with tasks,
yes.
and maybe demand more of yourself when you're talking about interpersonal relationships.
Right.
Good job, Celeste. Do you want to host this podcast? You're a lot better at this than we are.
But seriously.
Yeah. Dana's already put up something on Indeed. Yeah, exactly. It pays really great. It does not pay really great. That's going to do it for us. Thank you to Celeste Bucchan for being our guest.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Please, thanks for spending a little bit of your day with us, valued listener. Please rate and comment and subscribe to this podcast on the podcast vendor of your choice, and tell a friend. And here with an antiquated way of telling a friend about the RYLAcast is Josey.
Yes, in honor of Season 2, go ahead and type out a national letter of intent and say, I intend to get another person to listen to this podcast, and mail it to your alma mater and list the RYLAcast, and make sure you write out the URL.
Yeah, which is?
It's on the podcast.
I put you on the spot.
You did.
That's going to do it for us. Thanks to Celeste and Josey. Thanks for your courage.
Thanks, Greg.
We'll see you next time on the RYLAcast.